Foraging is a significant factor in the animal kingdom, as it is a key behavior to search for food and resources to increase chances of survival for the organisms. We tested risk-taking behavior using rewards to see how it influenced the pigeon's behavior, as we believe the reward would heighten behaviors in favor of the food over the risks. According to Overcontrol, yes Ovo, pigeons have become highly dependent on humans to provide them with food, meaning that it is significant for pigeons to identify the risks that are at stake when obtaining resources. This has led to our study focus on the domestic pigeon, or otherwise known as Columba, and determine whether they respond differently with or without risks while foraging. Therefore, we aim to observe the varying behaviors of each pigeon in response to the different levels of risks, where pigeons at low risk will continue to forage, as opposed to those exposed to high risks that we expect to fly away. To observe the response of Columba, we use 3 stages of risk, where the first exposed them to a reward with no risk as a control and observed the behavior for 3 minutes. The second, we applied a group member to walk through the forage enclosure at a low level risk. Lastly, we applied a group member to run through the forage enclosure at a high level risk. We used a scan sampling approach with time intervals every 10 seconds to accumulate our quantitative data. This data was recorded in a spreadsheet in which the different types of behaviors exhibited by the pigeons were listed. By analyzing our observations using an ethogram, we were able to create 3 activity budgets, each of which were based off the different levels of risk. These activity budgets were the best way to present our findings. These graphs provided how much an individual or group of animals behave within the time frame given by listing the count of behaviors that were observed in the time intervals, including foraging, resting, vigilance, preening, fluttering, and flight. From the control activity budget, we were able to see a large count of vigilant pigeons due to the reward being very minimal, as we did not account for the large population of pigeons as well as the other species from intervening in large flocks. But with the data obtained, we could also identify foraging as well as resting to be significant during the control testing. In the low-risk activity budget, we found the percentage of vigilant responses had increased drastically in ratio to the foraging and resting responses that we received in the control. Additionally, we see new responses of fluttering, which were not previously observed. As we applied the highest level of risk, we noticed a decrease in vigilance and a much higher activity count in flight. However, it should be noted that this was recorded only a few minutes after the low risk, possibly influencing the pigeons to be more aware of their surroundings, resulting in a faster flight response. Across the activity budget, we noticed resting and foraging behaviors in the control had drastically declined, with the level of vigilance becoming far greater, suggesting that as the risk was introduced, the pigeons' attentiveness increased greatly, as well as the behavior to flutter or take flight became more prominent in the higher levels of risk. Well, from our findings, it is conceivable to note that our hypothesis being enrichment rewards leading to greater toleration of human interaction was correct to some extent. As observed, the emergence of dynamic movements such as flight and fluttering in the high risk and less so in the low risk was predicted. Furthermore, the vigilant behavior was roughly similar in both high and low disturbance, leading us to believe that despite the slight change, much of the risk-taking behavior remained the same. Unfortunately, we cannot provide strong enough evidence for the interaction between foraging behaviors and human toleration, as the benefit of the trade-off between risk and reward could not be measured in exact values, and was only based on the behaviors alone. But this was proven difficult, as not nearly enough data could be collected to compare the population of pigeons found in Hyde Park. It was also difficult to interpret the level of vigilance that was initially conducted on the ethogram when analysing the recordings, due to the pigeons' peculiar movements and sometimes similar behaviours, proved to be difficult to differentiate. Another limitation proving its difficulty upon an experiment was the infamous iris. Due to ethical issues, it was impossible to avoid these bin chickens from farming our pigeon enrichments. According to Esteban and Natalia's article, it is possible for pigeons to show alertness towards human presence, in which our study was able to show. Furthermore, in reference to Nees and Tobowski's 2016 article, states that pigeons are capable of producing non-vocal acoustic sounds through fluttering to alert the surrounding flock. Therefore, it is possible for our data to indicate that the pigeons that were fluttering to have shown a level of threat seen in human disruption. Despite our findings to be unsatisfactory, we want to acknowledge that there are various ways of investigating pigeon behaviours. Studies by Mohammed and Roberts and Esteban and Natalia were able to conclude that pigeons were capable of identifying human movement. The studies mentioned before were obtained via the measurement of distance at which the pigeons would notice human presence. But for us to know if pigeons were willing to take risky behaviours for foraging rewards will require further investigation, and ideally with more convincing data to be collected with a refined experiment.